Good afternoon. It's Friday the 25th of October 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today, we have Debi Evans and Mark Anderson. Welcome to the programme, both. Now we're going to get started with yesterday was World Polio Day. So World Health Organization pushing this out, 24th of October. World Polio Day highlights the global efforts to end poliomyelitis worldwide. Polio is a life-threatening disease caused by the polio virus, which the World Health Assembly committed to eradicate in 1988. So one of the organizations that's helping with this is Rotary. And so they're wanting to raise money for it. So this was yesterday. World Polio Day is a time for Rotary members, public health advocates, and all who want a world free of polio to come together. All donations are matched 2-1 by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, tripling your impact. So that's yesterday. And so in honour of that, the MHRA had an announcement saying today, being yesterday, World Polio Day, 24th of October 2024, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency is highlighting our work training multiple World Health Organization polio laboratories around the world using an advanced molecular direct detection method that can halve detection times, supporting the global effort to eradicate polio and help save lives. In collaboration with Imperial College London, the University of Edinburgh, BioServe International, and funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we have trained 25 countries in just over 1 year on the use of a technique called direct detection by nanopore sequencing. This method can speed up the detection of polio outbreaks, saving public health authorities crucial time and money. This includes training laboratories in Pakistan, one of the last two countries where polio remains endemic, with the number of cases increasing this year. And the other country that where polio remains endemic, they say, is Afghanistan. Debi, let me welcome you to the programme first. Any thoughts on this, first of all?
Oh, yes, I have plenty of thoughts. Good afternoon, everyone. I have plenty of thoughts because, as you've just said, while polio is no longer existing pretty much, and it's vaccine-induced polio. So are we causing a problem? And the MHRA, let's not forget, are funded 86% by the pharmaceutical industry. And we're looking at gastrointestinal. So keep your eyes out this winter. It's going to be gastrointestinal. Maybe polio, hepatitis E, norovirus, as we'll come on to see. Oh, and let's not forget E. coli.
Thank you, Debi. Now, let's just, you've just mentioned vaccine-derived polio. So let's just bring the statistics on screen. Vaccine-derived in 2021, 682 cases. In 2020, actually, it was over 1,000 cases. This is globally. And so-called wild polio, 6 cases. Now, of course, they would argue that the reason that there are so few wild polio cases, sorry, maybe I didn't have that on screen. Let's just put that on screen. They would argue that the reason that there's so few wild polio cases is because of the vaccine program. I'll leave others to make their own minds up on that. But if you want to see the total number of vaccine-derived cases, statistics, have a look at the polio Global Eradication Initiative. And there's a graph there that you can scroll down through and see the number of cases for 2021, 2022, 2023 and this year so far. So keep an eye on that. Now, let's move on then to the issue of blood and infected blood. And the UK government has made an announcement on this. So let's have a look at Nick Thomas-Simons, who is the Paymaster General.
I wanted to give an update as we have reached another milestone for victims and campaigners of infected blood. From today, estates of those infected who've sadly passed away will be entitled to payment of £100,000. Personal representatives like brothers, sisters, parents and children can now apply to receive this payment. This is yet another group who have waited far too long for recognition and justice. When I came into government, I committed to delivering compensation to victims of infected blood as swiftly as possible. And I've always been clear that any compensation scheme needs to recognise those both infected and affected by this appalling injustice. Since taking office, we have established a comprehensive compensation scheme in law, which is set to be one of the largest schemes in modern history. Today's announcement about compensation is the right thing to do. It was advised by the Infected Blood Inquiry and set out in the Victims and Prisoners Act. Of course, no amount of compensation can fully address the suffering as a result of this scandal. But I hope that this further step on the road to justice reaffirms how committed this government is to delivering redress and relief to those who've waited far too long.
So some may view a bit of hypocrisy in that, particularly if we take into account people that have been injured by COVID-19 vaccines. Finally, the mainstream media seems to be jumping on this, and the BBC attempting to wind back their position perhaps here. Now, I know Debbie's going to be talking about this article a little bit later as well, but I just wanted to highlight it here because BBC In Depth asking, is the system letting down people who were harmed by COVID vaccines? So for the first time, an acknowledgement on the BBC at least that there have been these people. But Debbie, the question in my mind is the hypocrisy here and the question of whether or at least how long COVID vaccine victims are going to have to wait for compensation in their own right.
Well, I'm sorry to say that history repeating itself, I fear that the COVID vaccine injured and bereaved will have a very long time to wait. Looking at thalidomide, nearly 50 years. And blood, are we repeating history again, I think, because nobody's screening blood now, but lots more to come about that. But let's crack on with the NHS consultation, because if you didn't know, I think we're just pretty much heading for the biggest data grab in history. And let's look why. So back in July 2022, I wrote this article, the NHS Long-Term Plan and Mental Health Implementation Plan, Phoenix or Dinosaur. And in that, I put in 47 points about the NHS long-term plan. And that was in 2022. However, it would appear that Labour have revamped this, or have they? So they are notice the changing, they're changing the NHS and they're going to make it fit for the future. On the back of the rushed Lord Darcy report, you might remember that we've just had the results of that, which pretty much says the NHS is on its knees, which we knew about anyway. But recently, the Telegraph was reporting that Wes Streeting is going to be very generous and he's going to be handing out smartwatches to millions within the NHS. So no more excuses now. You can't say you haven't got a smart watch or you haven't got a smart app or you haven't got a smartphone, because you're going to get given one. And I want you to listen to what Wes Streeting has been saying regarding this new public consultation. I think he says the National Neighbourhood Service. Have a listen to this bit of video. He was being interviewed, Laura Kunsberg, on Sunday.
We have come in with a whole clear set of plans and a clear reform agenda in terms of what we want to achieve, a shift from hospital to community, the NHS as a neighbourhood health service as much as a national health service, the shift from analogue to digital, with the NHS not just benefiting from, but actively driving the revolution in life sciences, medtech and data, and thirdly, the shift from sickness to prevention. I do think, though, as we are hitting the ground running and delivering already, I think it is the right thing to do to involve patients, the people working in the NHS, and the people who are going to be crucial to the NHS's success, particularly in the world of life sciences and medtech, to help us write the long-term plan, because I want the people working in the NHS and the people using it to feel like their fingerprints are on it, that it's their plan as much as anyone else's.
So a new plan that actually isn't a new plan at all. But, you know, it's not just Wes Streeting that's getting excited about it. NHS England are getting very excited about creating this new 10-year health plan. And I want you to watch a little bit. I'm really sorry. I do apologise. The Chief Executive Officer of NHS England, Amanda Pritchard, who always wears funereal black, I've noticed, who is desperate for you to have your say. Have a listen.
All of us working in the NHS know we are facing big challenges. Our staff are working harder than ever to get services back on track, to get waiting lists down. Yet too often we're struggling to provide the right care in the right place at the right time for everyone who needs it. We know that there are underlying problems that need to be fixed. But I also know that many of the solutions we need are already here, working somewhere in the NHS. And I've seen some of the amazing work that's going on up and down the country. And I've heard from staff and from colleagues who are just passionate about the change that they are making already for their patients. So now it's your turn to have your say. By sharing your insight and experience into what's working and what's not, and the ideas you have for change, you can help us shape the future of the NHS. So whether you have a little to say or a lot, please do take part. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to set the NHS on a path that makes it fit for the future.
So thank you very much, Amanda, for that. Let's look at the new website that they've launched, bright yellow, not the normal blue of the NHS. So it's change.nhs.uk. Whatever you have to say it, but who can take part? And when I went to look at who could take part, it's pretty much everybody, actually. It's the public, it's professionals, it's industry, it's organisations. And I would like to give you an informed choice. So let's go back to the website, because it will tell you how you can have your say. So it says start here, click a little box. So apparently it tells you don't have to answer all the questions, but I hit start, and the next slide is what I got. So what have you got to do? Well, you've got to make an account, you've got to give your name, you've got to give your email. Apparently AI is not so clever that it doesn't know that you're not human. So you have to enter all your details. You will receive emails, and it's a sludge. So you have to opt out of that one if you don't want to receive emails. But let's look at the terms and conditions, because they're always in small print. If we have a look at the privacy portal, we can see that the DHS the Department of Health and Social Care, will work with external suppliers. A couple of them, I'm not going to go into them in any detail, but Thinks Insight and Go Vocal. I can see Ben probably working on that as I'm speaking. And they tell you that the Department of Health and Social Care is the data controller. So what data do they collect? Well, you've got the option to share. You don't have to give all of your data if you don't want to. But Go Vocal, who are one of the third party companies, they will take tech information like your IP address and your browser detail, and they offer a forum as well. But how do they use your data? So they actually use it by sharing it with Yonder Data Solutions, the Department of Health and Social Care, and NHS England. They say it's anonymised, but they say that it also may be published. So what rights do you have when you're filling in your consultation? You have rights as a data subject. So you do have the right to ask for information not to be used. However, they clarify this is not an absolute right. And so your information could be used anyway. And that goes to deleted information. You can ask for it not to be used, but there's no guarantee that it won't be used. Who are the data processors? Well, apparently, according to their website, the information is going to be stored in the UK and the European Union. But where and with who? I haven't found the answer to that yet. Now, I've spoken to Roy Lilly a number of times on UK Column. We've interviewed him. It's always good to speak to everyone, both sides of the fence. But he writes a newsletter every week. Here's a little screenshot of his newsletter, because he's writing on the comments on Labour's cunning plan, which is exactly the same as the Tory plan. So he also highlights that there is no difference with this 10-year plan at all. But pushing ahead, what's all this about? Well, let's go back to the NHS app. And here's the BBC trying to talk about the full access that you're going to get to your records on the NHS app. They're going to push ahead with a single patient record. This is the first step, in my opinion, to the one app, where you'll have to use one app for pretty much everything. They go on to say that ministers are committed, but you will notice that little name down at the bottom there that I've highlighted, Palantir. And Ben and I have all of us have done so much work on Palantir. Do look on the website, because that should raise a lot of concerns. But when they launched this on the website, you're going to enjoy this. The Department of Health have had to take down loads of comments, because people have been putting inappropriate comments and they've had to hide them. For example, beer should be on tap in hospital. I'm sure there's far more comments that they've taken down. And finally, the FT advisor are reporting that actually, you know what, this NHS mobile app, this is a game changer. This is a shot in the arm for the NHS. And I would finally finish on, we've talked about the NHS app loads of times. If you've got it, if you know somebody that's got it, please consider scrap the app. See if we can make that go viral. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you very much for that. And Mark, let me welcome you to the programme now then. And you've been following a conference on climate.
Yeah, in fact, Mike, I covered two by the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., one on October 18, one on October 22nd, covered them virtually. The photos are all mine. And this is all leading up to the United Nations Climate Change Conference coming up in Azerbai-sham, Baku, Azerbaijan, in November. And so there's a lot of emphasis on climate to kind of lead up to and act as a cornerstone to that conference. Anyway, the October 18 event featured Janie Bavishi, the Deputy NOAA Administrator. NOAA is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States. That's a federal agency. And the Senior Fellow at Brookings Metro, a branch of Brookings, who was the host, was Xavier Briggs. And I have some narrative here that I wrote. This is just the key straight ahead news from the event. A new generation of science, they said, can help communities become more resilient from the growing impacts of a changing climate, and AI will be carefully included, though they did say that AI has to be handled carefully. Don't go all in with it necessarily. NOAA, that National Oceanic Administration I talked about, is going to now take a more active role to help local communities adapt to climate change in order to be better prepared, they say, for wildfires, megastorms, flooding, droughts, hurricanes, etc. The next point, in the wake of two recent devastating hurricanes in the United States, NOAA is intent on making available decision-relevant, actionable information, making that available when giving people advance warning of bad storms. And among other things, and this was a special emphasis, there's a new climate action plan in the works in which NOAA will go beyond internet postings and sundry matters, and they'll actually visit localities before storms hit during good weather to get weather science to the people, quote unquote, they say, including NOAA running tabletop exercises in communities. In other words, running drills, not unlike the drills that happened before COVID came along, which was always sort of a mysterious thing. But anyway, disinformation then became a pretty hot topic at this particular Brookings event. And here's a video as to how they viewed disinformation related to weather data.
And I love the sound of that, but I'm sort of sitting here also, stunned at some of the disinformation that we're dealing with in our lives now, sadly. For example, before these hurricanes even made landfall, there were those spreading rumors on social media that the U.S. government was wielding weather weapons, as though our government would do that to our own people. And then after the worst of the events, as the rescue and relief efforts got underway, there were those telling communities on the ground, don't cooperate with FEMA, the emergency management folks. To many of it's kind of stunning, but I guess just a broad question to start. How do you think about, how should we think about equipping communities with intelligence and know-how in an age where we're dealing with disinformation more and more?
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that issue, Zav. It's so important. So let me just start by reframing NOAA's role, because we have traditionally called ourselves an agency that provides environmental intelligence. But it's more than that, right? NOAA is actually a boundary spanner in many ways. We're not just a science agency. We are working in partnership with communities across the country to apply that information and actually advance adaptation and resilient solutions to prepare for the impacts of extreme weather and for climate change. And I think that's really important because there's an intelligence that comes from that application, from those partnerships, and we're bringing that back into the agency and making sure that that information helps us design and deliver the services that people need. But this point about disinformation is absolutely critical to talk about and address right now, because you're right. There's, rumor mongering happening out there about the government's ability to control the weather. And it's just completely incorrect. I mean, as the president said, it's just ridiculous, right? And it's damaging, and it's actually quite dangerous, because we need people to heed the warnings and the advisories that we're putting out there, especially when it comes to life-saving information like weather forecasts or hurricane forecasts.
Well, I went to the NOAA library in wake of their comments on disinformation. And what did I find? I found some information that's both unsettling and very revealing, especially when we get into some federal law. And what I found out, again, Janie works for NOAA, and this is from NOAA's own website, their own library, Weather Modification Project Reports. What is weather modification? Any activity performed with the intention of producing artificial changes in the composition, behavior, or dynamics of the atmosphere. And it gives Code of Federal Regulations references. What role does NOAA play in weather mod? Companies that intend to engage in weather mod activities within the U.S. are required by the Weather Modification Act of 1976, an act of Congress, to provide a report to the administrator of NOAA at least 10 days prior to modifying the weather. These reports, et cetera, et cetera. And if you violate it, if you don't give enough advance notice, if you're a university or a government agency and you try and modify the weather, you can be fined $10,000. And there's miscellaneous and sundry information here. It mentions that NOAA does not research or conduct any kind of activity directly with weather modification. They simply monitor other people doing it. Now, here's where it gets really revealing. They talk about weather modification activities being defined as any activity performed with the intention of producing artificial changes in the composition, behavior, or dynamics of the atmosphere. And the following, when conducted as weather modification activities, shall be reported. And the key thing here is that by listing the things that you're supposed to give them notice about, and if you don't give them notice, you'll be fined. In so doing, they admit that there's all different kinds of weather modification, not just cloud seeding, which is the most common. But here I'll read some of these. Seeding or dispersing of any substance into clouds or fog to alter drop size distribution. That's cloud seeding. Number 2, using fires or heat sources to influence convective circulation or to evaporate fog. Number 3, modifying the solar radiation exchange of the earth or clouds through the release of gases, dust, liquids, or aerosols into the atmosphere. Again, by listing these prohibited activities, they're saying that they exist. They're saying that these technologies already exist. Others include modifying the characteristics of land or water surfaces by dusting or treating with powders, liquid sprays, dyes, or other materials, releasing electrically charged or radioactive particles or ions into the atmosphere is another one. Number 6, get this one, applying shock waves, sonic energy sources, or other explosive or acoustic sources to the atmosphere. 7, using aircraft propeller downwash, jet wash, or other sources of artificial wind generation. 8, and listen to this one, using lasers or other sources of electromagnetic radiation or other activities undertaken with the intent to modify the weather or climate. So this is very, very revealing. And we'll move on from there and wind this up. Now, this was referred to in the NOAA literature, Public Act 92-205. This is the original Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972. Get the year. Modification of the weather was known. We had the technologies to do it, and we wrote a law about it as far back as 1972. And then there was the National Weather Modification Policy Act of 1976 that may have superseded the 1972 law. I'm not sure about that part. Anyway, let's stick with that slide. There's a couple other important matters on that. I'll read the ones I underlined and emphasize. Number 2, weather modification technology has significant potential for preventing, diverting, moderating, or ameliorating the adverse effects of disasters, hurricanes, drought, tornadoes, hail, lightning, floods, all that stuff, and enhancing crop production and water availability And skipping to number 4 that I also emphasized, weather modification programs may have long-range and unexpected effects on existing climatic patterns. And disaster relief, going back to number 3 a little bit, require appropriate federal action to prevent or alleviate such disasters and hazards. And the takeaway point, Mike, here is that what this law is saying is that the government is basically beholden to go ahead and conduct activities that would prevent bad weather. And so we've had all these bad weather episodes lately, 2 big hurricanes. There doesn't appear to be any activity by the government to ameliorate or prevent or reduce the severity of these storms, even though these old laws basically require them to. Again, very revealing and unsettling. And just to wind up here, the second Brookings event, again, taking place right before the Azerbaijan UN summit, featured Todd Stern, an author. I took all these pictures at both Brookings events as original photos through the screenshot. And Todd Stern went over some basics about climate. He published a book to that effect, and we'll move on a little bit and just, I beg your pardon, kind of summarize this. I'll cherry pick this. Todd Stern called the Paris Climate Agreement one of the most important agreements in the 21st century and in the last 100 years, quote unquote. He says there have been pro-agreement naysayers complaining that the Paris Pact is not binding, but he said it's actually structured to be part legally binding and part not, quote unquote. The climate targets, CO2 emission limits, for instance, that each country submits are not binding. However, there's all sorts of rules in the engagement, such as the transparency rule that is binding. Countries have to regularly submit new climate change compliance targets. And lastly, they're talking about that for all the countries to get on board with climate change in the way that they're pursuing it, they're looking at pooling at least $100 billion per year by developing countries. And there's actually talk now of investing up to $2 trillion a year to adhere or to comply with all the rules and regulations that would bring about the climate change they want. And this last slide for now, we can stop here. I found that there was a huge onslaught of headlines talking about doom and gloom regarding the climate as we lead up to that UN summit. People can check out the slides for themselves to see what the media has been reporting in its flood of information leading up again to that summit. So back to you, Mike. It's a lot to unpack, but that's it for now.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, if you like what the UK Column does and you would like to support us, please go to support.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us there. You can make a donation. You can join as a member. We do need your financial support. If you possibly can help us, please do that. You can pick something up at the UK Column shop, and we do get a small percentage if you buy anything at clive2carl.com. But as we were talking about yesterday, please have a look at the share icons on every article and video that we publish on the UK Column website. Please use them and try to counteract the effects of the algorithms. And of course, you can have a look at comments that other members have made by clicking on that link. Now, in the meantime, let's get on to the issue of online safety. And Ofcom has published its Global Regulators Index of Online Safety Powers. Now, this is created by an organization called the Global Online Safety Regulators Network, and they published their regulatory index, which provides, they say, a comparison of how the international online safety regulators are approaching the respective regulatory duties. So the number of countries in this Global Online Safety Regulators Network at the moment is shown on this map. So we've got the United Kingdom, Ireland, France. The Netherlands is actually included as well. We've got Slovakia, South Africa, Australia, South Korea, and Fiji. So they are extremely excited to talk about how they are developing their online safety regulations across the world, because we've got to make sure that nobody can say anything which is not permitted. So they are highlighting how each country is doing against the various regulatory remits that they have. For example, developing and enforcing code standards and guidance, proactive content scanning, receiving and investigating individual user complaints, and so on. And you can see how each of the countries is doing there. And then another graphic that they've produced is all about how they're regulating online harms, including things like disinformation and illegal content and so on and so forth. And the next one here is on regulated entities, so the social media services, hosting and storage services, gaming services, application distribution services, and so on. So they're very keen to make sure they have an all-encompassing regulatory regime right around the world to cover this. But one of the major concerns that Ofcom in particular have had in recent days and weeks has been the kind of content that we saw at the time of the recent riots in the UK. And Dame Melanie Dawes has written a letter to the government on this, saying, "Thank you for your letter of the 16th of October. I share our commitment to ensuring that the Online Safety Act is implemented as quickly as possible. The hateful and violent disorder we saw in the aftermath of the horrific attack at Southport this summer is a matter of great concern to us both. From the end of this year, firms must initially assess the risks associated with illegality on their platforms, and then once our codes of practice are in force, use the measures we've recommended or other effective measures to mitigate these risks." She mentioned that posts about the Southport incident and subsequent events from high-profile accounts reached millions of users, demonstrating the role that virality and algorithmic recommendations can play in driving divisive narratives at a crisis period. So Ofcom absolutely blaming the content on the platforms for driving the riots in the summer and the need for the platforms therefore shut down what she described as illegal content, but I'm not sure that very much of it was actually illegal. It may have been misinformed, it may have been ill-advised, but I'm not certain it was illegal. And so we've got to be very careful about this and whether we're seeing the creeping back of this idea of legal but harmful. In the meantime, Ofcom is now consulting on how they're going to fund themselves as they roll out the Online Safety Act. So this is the first consultation. They say that Ofcom, as a regulator of the Online Safety Act in 2023, Online Safety Act 2023, is publishing as part of our work to implement a new fees and penalties regime to online safety. So if you go to that page, you'll find a response form. I don't know whether this is open to the public or not, but maybe you might want to give your thoughts on this anyway. And I just want to take this opportunity to remind everybody that we streamed out a special UK column news yesterday on taking the fight to the censors. If you haven't seen this yet, please do watch it. Now, we did stream this on our YouTube channel because it's fairly safe to do that since we're not talking about certain topics, as I'm sure everybody understands what I'm talking about. We do want everybody that is watching other independent media other than the UK column to get involved in helping promote this and send this video to those people, because we want to hear from anybody that wants to get involved in this fight. And as I say, that was streamed out on the UK Column YouTube channel. We've just got slightly under 95,000 subscribers on there. If you're on YouTube and you use YouTube, do subscribe to it. Let's get it up to 100,000. Let's have a bit of fun with these people. We want to carry out some kind of sacrificial event around the silver plaque that people get when they reach 100,000 subscribers. So let's see if we can get to 100,000 before we get this channel shut down again. But anyway, in the meantime, we are taking the fight to the censors. Watch that video. Please distribute it as far and wide as you possibly can, but certainly to any other online media or independent media organizations that you watch and are in contact with. Debbie, let's come back to you then and more on health.
That's another thing, whether it's a consultation or whether it's treatment you're receiving, we would like to think that at UK Column we can give you an informed choice, or at least the red flags or the pointers where to go to get an informed choice. No, not so much more than today. Have a look at this article in The Conservative Woman. I'm not going to go into it in any depth. It's called When a Jab Doesn't Work, Just Change the Name. It's a very, very good article, and you'll see why as we go further into this section. Lot to cover. So, courtesy of Sanofi, we have a quadrivalent influenza vaccine split virion, inactivated, high-dose suspension for injection in a pre-filled syringe, basically the flu jab. Do you know what you're getting? And do you notice that there was a black triangle there? And I just want to highlight this black triangle. I've marked it in red here. We've done loads of work on black triangle, including an article I wrote about, which is called When is Enough Enough? A black triangle is a medicine that's subject to extra monitoring. And this particular injection is for the over 60s. So what are the warnings? Well, many conditions have been contraindicated, including Guillain-Barré syndrome post-vaccination. If you have a temperature or you're unwell or you're immune deficiency, there are recommendations for you not to take this injection and to speak to your doctor first. And there's also severe allergic reactions, including a medical emergency of anaphylaxis. So do you know what you're taking? It also goes on to say that this injection should not be given in the same limb. And if it's going to be given at the same time as another injection, there is a likelihood of an exacerbation of intensified serious adverse reactions. And finally, on this particular injection, it should not be given to children, pregnant women, or breastfeeding mums unless you've got explicit instructions from your doctor, although I would think again for all of these injections, please do your research. Let's stay on injections because Professor Christopher Whitty recently X'd that we've got a fantastic new norovirus mRNA vaccine trial courtesy of the NIHR, and this is also courtesy of Moderna. This is the Nova 301 trial. And I just want to talk a little bit about this because I'm quite shocked, actually. Norovirus is known as the winter vomiting condition. It can close down hospitals, which is an alarm bell, of course, but it normally goes away. It's vomiting and diarrhea, temperature, fever, aching, but it normally goes away in 2 days. I am shocked that we are looking, or that they are looking to do a clinical trial, and mRNA. mRNA anyway, full stop, is bad enough. But for a norovirus, it's even worse. And I believe that they're warning ahead of this now, because they say that the tests now, they're testing 50% more people positive for norovirus already. So we can see where this is going. And with the 100-day mission, is this going to mean that we're going to get a Moderna mRNA jab for norovirus rolled out within 100 days? I don't know. But Dr. Zoe Harcum, who's she's a food expert, an obesity expert, she's pretty shocked already. So more to come on that story. And sticking with X, I just want to highlight Rupert Lowe MP, who's the Reform MP for Great Yarmouth. 11.9 million so far has been wiped off the debt of people, foreign visitors coming in and not paying their bills. And there's more outstanding. This is your money. You got this from a Freedom of Information. So just cracking on again with more health stories. I just want to get as many in as I can. Pleased to remind you of the Pfizer Situation Room that Cheryl Granger and Mike have set up, where you will find facts. You will find the latest analysis, and the language is facts. And also facts, again, we provide facts with irrefutable evidence. With John Bodwin, his interviews we've shown, please go back and look at them, because these are facts, part 1 and part 2. The reason I'm talking about the fact that the UK column give you facts is because I'm going to go back to that BBC story that Mike was talking about earlier. Fergus Walsh, the health correspondent, is the system letting down people who are harmed by COVID vaccines? They say that the Oxford AstraZeneca was credited with saving millions of lives. Really? I don't know where the evidence of those millions of lives are, but they do admit that it's also responsible for causing rare blood clots, which could be fatal. They then go on to say that they need to discuss not just the huge positives, I'm not quite sure where those huge positives are, but the small minority left injured or bereaved, a tiny fraction At the last count, there were 300,000 back in 2021 of serious adverse reactions from the COVID vaccine. It would appear, he says, that they've been airbrushed out of the pandemic. However, they go on to say that they admit that nothing in life is free from risk. A bit late now, isn't it, the BBC? And they also say that there is plenty of well-documented benefits for the vaccine. I'm not sure that I've seen that just recently. And apparently this vaccine has been credited with saving 6.3 million lives. I'm not sure where that data comes from either. They also go on to talk about a social contract. Have you heard about a social contract? 25 million adults have had AstraZeneca. And of course, they're going on about the estimation, this language, estimation. UK column, we provide facts. And it seems to be that the BBC are using estimations. And they say that even though serious adverse reactions are a rare event, it's a kind of social contract. It's really a kind of social contract between the individual and state. And you know, in the late 1970s and to 2020, there were below 6,500 claims under the vaccine damage payment scheme. So far, since the COVID vaccine, we have 14,000 have made claims and only 180 have been awarded. And we know that AstraZeneca is responsible for causing blood clots in brain, which can be fatal. And even more insult to injury, AstraZeneca apologise. They cannot comment because of ongoing litigation. They send their sympathy. They say that patient safety is of the highest priority, and they insist that the jab has an acceptable safety profile. I'll let you all join your conclusions from there. Moving on now to Sky News, from the BBC to Sky News, who announced that the NHS again are going to trial. The NHS seem to be the experimental central because of all the data it has. Superhuman AI for helping predict disease and early death. And further on, we're looking in ECGs here. And we're going to be looking at trialling them. This is down to Imperial College, same old names as per normal. There's going to be lots of other sites, which I will confirm to you in a minute. And this is using the AIR system, which is the AI ECG risk. And apparently AIR was able to correctly identify patients' risk of death in the next 10 years. In 78% of cases, according to research in Lancet Digital Health. That will be interesting. But what's the goal? So the goal is that all ECGs in the future, in 5 to 10 years' time, will be done via AI. Why are we expecting so many people to be having cardiac problems? Why are we expecting people to have so many ECGs moving forward? And when I looked at Cardiology Advisor and another article, they say that it's literally going to be testing the pulse. And they go on to say and make it plain that the healthcare information that is accessed through this will be highly protected, and AI will require new regulations and safeguards. Well, we've already spoken a couple of weeks ago about AC, the AI Safety Institute, and we know that that's a public-private partnership. But what does this actually mean? Well, going back to what Wes Streeting was saying, we're going back to wearables. So smartwatches, smartphones, apps. We're going to have apps that are going to warn you of a cardiac emergency before it even happens. We're also going to use this AI technology in cardiac surgery, heart surgery, enhanced heart surgery. But what does the British Heart Foundation say? Because we know Patrick Vallance and many others are involved in the British Heart Foundation, another big revolving door. Well, they say that, yes, this is going to be used to detect heart disease in record speed. How quickly? Well, I'm telling you now, this is very quick. This is while you're in the scanner and you're having a scan, 20 seconds, and AI will analyze your ECG, and it's going to be more precise. It's going to be in confidence. It's going to free up loads of times, and it's going to extract far more information. So basically, we're going to be freeing up tons of time. We're going to be using this, I'm sorry to say, in hospitals that I've practiced in, University College Hospital, Barts and the Royal Free, and it's going to be rolled out all over the place. Of course, we're going to be saving doctors a load of time. We're going to be clearing the backlogs, but they need the public support. They really need public support on this. And I just want you to know that they want to campaign powering through science. This is all about testing in the UK. And just to finish this segment, because there are so many news stories, and I'm so scared that I'm missing out things that I know mean a lot to people. But I just want to end on the assisted dying bill, because we know that this is just coming into Parliament at the end of November. So there's both relief and fear ahead of this. But Wes Streeting has announced that he is not voting in favour of assisted dying. He will be voting against it, but much more to come on this in the future.
Debi, thank you very much for that. And Mark, let's come back to you then. And what is the case of the future of money?
Yesterday, Mike, the Washington Post, everybody's favorite newspaper, some call it the compost, did a program, A Look at the Future of Money, presented by the Post in Washington, D.C. Again, original screenshot photos. I put the title above that, Digi-Money, A Foregone Conclusion, ? Part 1. A lot going on here. There's a second half of the presentation that I didn't cover yet. So this is part 1. Over the next 1 or maybe 2 weeks, I'll do follow-ups on this. But back to that first slide real quickly, please. We have the presenters were Eswar Prasad, an Indian-American Cornell University professor, economist, and author of The Future of Money. He's pretty much the foremost authority, they say, on central bank digital currencies and digital money in general. And the other main presenter in the first half yesterday, Irene Arias-Hoffman, CEO of IDB Lab, that's the Inter-American Development Bank. So the Washington Post had a reporter being a host for all this. Basically, here's the gist of it. Artificial intelligence, online lending, cryptocurrencies, and emerging technologies are reshaping the future of finance and payments. On Thursday, October 24, yesterday, investors and experts joined the Post to assess the global payments landscape and the future of money. And 3 countries have fully launched a digital currency. I wanted to make sure I note that on this initial report, and they are the Bahamas, Jamaica, and Nigeria, having launched a digital currency in the full sense. Bahamas, Jamaica, and Nigeria. Anyway, a bit of a conflict of interest was detectable right up front, and that's why I put that title in, A Foregone Conclusion, ? Note the Stellar Development Foundation shown on this introductory slide about the future of money. And here's a little bit about them. Built for a mission, the Stellar Development Foundation is a nonprofit created and structured to achieve a mission: create equitable access to the global financial system through blockchain technology. We believe that some of today's financial systems aren't designed for everyone, and that by leveraging networks like Stellar, we can do our part to change that. So basically, you have a sponsor that has a direct interest in going all digital for money. So therefore, the entire conference is pretty much biased toward going with digital money and away from a cash-based society. And these are just a couple of questions in my last slide that came up at the program yesterday. One was from a Jill Carroll in Florida. Would the United States ever become cashless or digital only? And in parentheses, she put, that scares me. Well, Mr. Prasad basically said the US and Switzerland are the ones that are really clinging to cash right now. But international payments, I'm looking at my notebook from yesterday, international payments for sure will be cashless. And eventually, he said, most or all individual transactions very likely would be cashless, but he understands it may take some time. He also talked about there is a dark side, the reduced privacy of your actual transactions being fully known and fully recorded, and no longer would you have the privacy of cash and the possibility of your accounts being hacked, things like that. And also, on the second question, we all have apps on our phones and debit cards. Why do we need a digital currency? The 2 presenters were decidedly vague on answering that one, Mike. And Irene Hoffman, for her part, said that digital currencies and central bank digital currencies, things like that, will be very relevant when it comes to remittances. She said poorer countries often have remittances that are 30% of their GDP. And therefore, digital wallets will be used, and people who are separated, isolated, displaced, including migrants, including people working far away from home in other countries, the digital revolution will enable them to send money home more efficiently, things like that. But anyway, that, Mike, is kind of the initial report. Stay tuned for the extra, and I'll talk about Fed Now and talk about how Fed Now was described as not being related to digital currencies or central bank digital currencies, but now they're admitting it more or less is. So we were right all along about that, and I'll talk about that in extra, and I'll have more next week.
Let's finish on BRICS then, because if we bring this image on screen first, so this is from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China. President Xi Jinping meets with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This has been really the emblematic of the entire event because of the efforts by the West to try to split India and China apart from each other. The economists in particular are never happy when this kind of thing happens. But anyway, this was the 16th BRICS summit. It drew to a close yesterday in Kazan in Russia. With this came the announcement of from the 9 current members of BRICS that they had agreed to invite 13 more countries to join, and this brings another billion people into the BRICS or under the auspices of the BRICS. So it now represents over 57% of the world's population. We had to make sure that we were understanding that the Commonwealth meeting was happening at the same time, because the Commonwealth, of course, also represents half the population of the Earth, apparently. And so this is definitely a competition going on here in an attempt to keep the developing countries, the so-called Global South, under the sort of influence of Britain in particular, and the wonderful King Charles, who, of course, is very keen to use the Commonwealth to continue to push his green agenda. So anyway, the BRICS released a communique where they were talking about enhancing cooperation for global and regional stability and security. And of course, they were extremely critical of what Israel is doing in Gaza and in Lebanon, fostering an economic and financial cooperation for just global development. And they are talking about, as we mentioned a day or two ago, they're talking about creating a new international payment system to sideline the dollar. They're saying they're deeply coerced about the disruptive effect of unlawful unilateral coercive measures, including illegal sanctions. But they say at the end here that this is causing problems for the world economy, for international trade, and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So no matter where you go, you will see the Sustainable Development Goals. But as Mark has pointed out many times in the past, if you look at the titles of each of the Sustainable Development Goals, they in themselves are not a terrible thing. It's when you start looking at the implementation of it, and perhaps there is a difference between what BRICS is attempting to do and what the West would like to do with the Sustainable Development Goals. We could talk about this a bit more in extra as well. They said, we underscore the need to reform the current international financial architecture and meet the global financial challenges, including global economic governance and so on, to establish a grain trading platform within BRICS and so on. So one person that was sort of hijacked by the mainstream media was George Galloway. He had this to say to Sky News.
Why is it significant?
Well, it's the beginning of a new world, I think. It's the Bretton Woods of the 21st century. It's the beginning of new financial, economic, and even political structures which will greatly influence the lives of the vast majority of the population. Probably not ours in Britain. We'll be quite late to the party, I think. But given that half the world is already in BRICS, that BRICS already is bigger than the G7, the so-called giant 7 economies, it's axiomatic that our children and children unborn are going to feel the benefits of Kazan 2024.
So Galloway taking a very positive view of the whole thing. The question is, what was the Western media saying about it? Well, let's begin with the Mail Online. Putin's rage at BBC Reporter, Russian president cannot hide his anger as he's challenged over Ukraine. This was the headline in the Mail, and they chose they had a very carefully chosen frame from the video to imply that Putin was absolutely raging. Let's just have a look at the clip, and you can decide for yourselves whether you agree with that.
Я прочитал итоговую декларацию BRICS, и там говорится о необходимости глобальной и региональной стабильности и безопасности и справедливого мира. И, в общем-то, девиз российского председательства BRICS включает такие понятия, по-моему, да, вот справедливости и безопасности. Но как все это соотносится с вашими действиями вот последние 2,5 года, да, вот с вторжением российских войск в Украину, да, вот где справедливость, стабильность и безопасность?
Я понимаю, о чем вы говорите. Но разве справедливо с точки зрения безопасности годами игнорировать наши постоянные обращения к партнерам, не расширять НАТО на восток? Разве справедливо врать нам в лицо, обещая, что такого расширения не будет, и нарушая взятые на себя обязательства делать это? Разве справедливо забраться к нам вот в подбрюшье совсем, скажем, в ту же Украину, и начать там строить, не готовиться, а именно уже строить базы военные? Разве это справедливо? А справедливо провести государственный переворот, о котором я говорил, отвечая на вопрос вашего коллеги, наплевав на международное право и на все принципы международного права и устава ООН, финансируя переворот в другой стране, в данном случае на Украине, и подтолкнув ситуацию к ее развитию в направлении горячей фазы. Разве это справедливо с точки зрения всемирной безопасности? А разве справедливо нарушать взятые на себя обязательства в рамках ОБСЕ, когда все страны Запада подписали бумагу, согласно которой не может быть безопасности одной страны при нарушении безопасности другой? Мы же говорили, не надо этого делать, это нарушает нашу безопасность, расширение НАТО. Нет, все равно делали. Разве это справедливо? Никакой справедливости здесь нет. И мы хотим поменять эту ситуацию. И мы добьемся этого. Последний еще раз, извините.
По поводу утверждения британской разведки, что Россия вот сеет хаос на улицах Британии.
Послушайте меня. Это, спасибо вам за то, что вы напомнили мне про эту часть. Но это полная чушь.
Well, absolutely raging there, as you can see. But George Galloway, if we come back to the interview that he did with Sky News, that was his comment that we saw just before Putin there on BRICS itself. But then the Sky News journalist was attempting to take the same kind of tack with him. Let's just have a look at this.
Ukraine might see this very differently, of course. You say influence the lives of people. Russia's influencing the lives of people.
Yeah, I mean, I knew because you're Sky News, that's what you have to ask. But you and our governments, the governments of the West, are fully responsible for the crisis in Ukraine.
Russia's not responsible.
You're too young to know, but
Didn't Russia invade Ukraine?
You're too young to know, but in 2014, the West, including our country, overthrew the elected president of Ukraine and set in train
Didn't Russia invade Ukraine?
Listen, I'm here to talk about the BRICS. If you want to talk about the BRICS, we can.
Isn't that all in fine?
You just bumped into me in the corridor. I have, I think, graciously agreed to talk to you, but don't try and put me on a trap.
Absolutely right. So let's just finish this with this headline in Business Insider. BRICS new declaration shows Russia war still can't get the international backing that Moscow wants, and very much, reiterating again this theme that Putin is on his own in the world. So I just thought we would end with with this little bit of video. It is from RT, and anybody that wants to make accusations that we're pushing Russian propaganda here, that's up to you. But at the end of the day, I think Galloway was pretty close to being absolutely bang on there with those comments to the Sky News journalist. Putin was not angry. And when we look at the number of headlines we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years about Putin dying from cancer today and all this other stuff that we've seen, is it any wonder that there's criticism of the West's position on this? But let's just have a look at this from RT.
Putin is now isolated from the world more than ever.
Russia has never been so isolated. We have never been more united.
We have demonstrated that Russia is isolated and alone.
Russia is globally isolated.
It shows the degree to which Mr. Putin and Russia are increasingly isolated.
President Putin has never been more isolated.
Isolated and alone.
Isolated and struggling.
Increasingly isolated.
Russia is more isolated on the world stage than ever.
Yes, totally isolated. So for those that are listening and not watching, that video was showing him, Putin, shaking hands with the world leaders at BRICS, while Western leaders claiming isolation. Debbie, let's end with a couple of finally slides.
Yes, and finally, did we have British summer? Did we ever get summer? Well, it's finished. So just as a quick reminder, this weekend, we use an hour's sleep, I'm afraid, as the clocks go back for anybody that's abroad.
No. We fall back, Debbie. We get an extra hour this.
Did I say it wrong? I'm so sorry. Spring forward, fall back. We fall back, so we gain an hour's sleep. See, that's how confused I've got. But summertime came and summertime went, and I'm really sorry, but I don't know what happened to it. And as a finally, of course, it's that time of the year, and we're coming up to the Festival of Remembrance and the Cenotaph, the Royal British Legion. And what does your money go to for your poppy? Or do you buy a poppy? Well, you might be relieved to know that the Royal British Legion, thank you to everybody that informed me of this, they have now appointed their head of diversity and inclusion, and they're getting a nice little salary of between £64,122 and £67,437. But the job, I'm afraid, is now closed.
Okay, well, lucky person whoever got that. Thank you very much, Debbie, for that. Thank you, Mark, as well. We have to finish there for today. So thank you to everybody who's been watching. Join us for Extra if you're a UK Column member in a few minutes' time. Lots to talk about today. Otherwise, have a great weekend, and we'll see you at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday. Bye-bye.